Well, this was the scene somewhere in Ireland captured by Abby on Twitter. You could see almost a kind of hurricane like wind blowing through this petrol station and forecourt. Pretty remarkable scenes indeed, and that was the case across many portions of the British Isles during late last night and into the early hours of this morning. Thanks for clicking on to the Monday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. We do have a fairly broad trough in place at the moment. There is Storm Isha now pulling up through the Norwegian Sea. We do and have had a pretty brisk west to northwesterly wind blowing throughout the course of today. Those winds gradually easing from the intense gusts that we've seen during late last night and into the early hours of this morning. The pressure here at the house dropped to 954 millibars, very little in the way of wind, and then they did ramp up. We did record a gust during the just after midnight of 54 miles per hour, and it did actually cause a little bit of damage to some of the garden furniture out the back there. So Isha did pack its punch and produced not only a record low pressure here at the station, Marfogan Weather HQ, but also it produced the strongest wind as well here. But hot on the heels of Isha, we have got newly named Storm Jocelyn, which will cause problems tomorrow and into the early hours of Wednesday morning. And this will cause further disruption both by rainfall as well as strong gusty winds that may cause more damage across northern areas of the British Isles. The strongest of the winds look to be across the north, where we do have an amber warning in place around the coastal areas of northern Scotland. So here was the top wind gusts recorded by Storm Isha: 99 miles per hour at Brisley Wood, Capel 90, Needles Old Battery 86, Shap 82, Prestwick was 81, and 79 at Salisbury in the south of Scotland. Now, there was a report that we had a wind gust in excess of 168 miles per hour. Now, apparently, this is quite a legitimate wind gust, and that was recorded at Glencoe Mountain. So, with Cairngorm Summit being offline at the moment, the reason I think is because of heavy icing on the equipment. That is offline, but it certainly would be an interesting one if that 168 was actually a legitimate reading, because that would be pretty close to the all-time UK wind gust record of 173 miles per hour. We did see a gust probably about 10 or so years ago. I think it was back in the winter of 2011, and we recorded a wind gust of 165 miles per hour. So this actually could exceed that 165 gust that was recorded, I believe, in 2011 over Cairngorm Summit. So very, very impressive wind gusts across the higher parts of the UK. But even through the central belt, I do believe there was a roof ripped off a block of flats in Cumbernauld, and there was probably all sorts of damage that was reported across the country. I just unfortunately don't have much in the way of information at the moment. But this is the current satellite image. The sun sets on Storm Isha, and you can see back to the west, well out over the North Atlantic to the south of Greenland, there is the mass of cloud gathering with Storm Jocelyn. Now, we will see this system arrive, not quite as deep as what we seen with Storm Isha, but nonetheless, it will pack a punch, and it is likely to generate wind gusts in the most exposed areas of western Scotland over the high ground, upwards of 80 miles per hour. Again, over top of the mountains, we could see wind gusts in the 130, 140 range. I don't think we're going to see just quite as strong with Jocelyn as we did with Isha. But you can see here, as we play through this GFS loop, you can see that the system moves into Norway here, generating heavy snowfall in some areas, gale force winds, all sorts of problems. We do have a little bump in the isobars into the early hours of tomorrow morning, but there's that mass of rain associated with the first frontal system moving through during the course of tomorrow around about midday. Now, notice here that the centre of the low isn't quite as close to the UK as what we've seen with Storm Isha. I do believe the central pressure dropped to at least 948 millibars, and that is the lowest central pressure in a few years, I believe, across the UK and Ireland. But that system will be bringing some very powerful winds indeed later on tomorrow and into potentially the early hours of Wednesday morning. You see here the pressure at 965, and there's an inner circle here away from that that may actually have a pressure closer to 960 millibars. But on the southern flank of the system, like we've seen with Isha, is going to generate the strongest potential wind gusts. And if we look at the wind gust chart here, we have got a line of very strong winds associated with this system. We've got this deep trough at the moment, strong ridge of high pressure across southern Europe, deep area of low pressure, elongated, stretched out across the North Atlantic, the UK, and into Northern Europe here. And when you've got that gradient, you're going to see a long fetch of potentially hurricane force winds. So that may generate some very, very powerful wave action along the west coast of both Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Scotland, as well as Wales and England here. So wave action may be an issue as well with this system during the course of tomorrow and into Wednesday here. So if we go back to the overview chart for the GFS, you can see that that system then clears out, and we continue to see actually a bit of a bump in the isobars here. Higher pressure, as was shown in the longer term, the medium range, I did highlight that it looks as if higher pressure is going to try and build from Iberia northwards up into the UK and Ireland and potentially settle things down. But by doing so, it is going to increase the temperature, and we could see some very, very mild air indeed as we move towards the middle portions of next week here, or this week, sorry, not next week, this week. As the depth of the trough starts to become stronger and it kind of relocates more up towards the North Atlantic and Greenland here. You can see here, if we look at the geopotential height anomaly chart here, this kind of represents quite nicely where we're at with regards to, let's have a look at the mean sea level pressure actually. You can see there's the classic positive NAO signal starting to show up, building heights over Europe, deepening trough over the North Atlantic and Greenland here. And then if you look at the 2 meter temperature anomalies here, you can see that we're in some very, very mild air indeed. So like I've said already, it'll be interesting to see if we can have this turnaround between what we've seen so far this month and what we may have. So this is the month of January to date so far, and firmly below average. But the amount of warmth that's coming through the final 7, 8, 9 days of the month, it's going to be interesting to see if we can start to see either back to near average, if not even slightly warmer than average. So kind of holding my breath here because I did say that it would be a slightly colder than average January. I also said it would be a drier than average January, and I'm starting to kind of doubt that actually because of the amount of rain that fell with Isha, that's expected to fall with Jocelyn. Yes, we've got higher pressure building in behind Jocelyn, but it's going to be interesting to see when all is said and done what happens with regards to the rainfall anomaly versus the January average. So let's have a quick look actually and see what the current situation is like. This is off Weather Online, and you can see a rash of very heavy blustery showers rattling in on that stiff westerly flow. Temperatures are relatively mild, but it feels quite cold actually in that strong westerly wind. And we've got these rash of blustery showers. Now, some of these showers are generating some lightning activity actually. If we look at the lightning chart here off this website, you can see that we've got some lightning activity across parts of what looks like Yorkshire to the south of Glasgow, into Ayrshire, into South Lanarkshire, the Fries and Galloway. We're seeing some reports of lightning. We're seeing quite a lot of cluster here through the mid portion of the Kintyre Peninsula into the Isle of Arran as well, and possibly up across the far north of Skye. We're seeing some activity over northern portions of Northern Ireland, Donegal. We're also seeing some lightning activity here, which is quite interesting to see. And further south, it looks as if there is not much in the way of lightning activity, but it certainly is a stiff westerly flow, a cold flow with very cold air in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, which is generating that strong upward lift. And what happens is you generate the charge in the atmosphere with the instability to produce the lightning activity. So the latest run of the MJO, it looks as if we are seeing it now going towards an amplified phase 6 and then turning towards the null phase as it approached phase 7. Now, phase 7 at this time of the year does enhance blocking further north across the North Atlantic and the high latitude. So it's going to be interesting to see as we go forward what happens with this situation with the MJO. Also, with regards to what's happening within the stratosphere, we'll watch this space and see what happens. Do check out the it's a two-part global weather and climate report yesterday, edition 77. Talk about the stratosphere, MJO, the global picture, the massive turnaround between cold over North America and Europe versus warmer than average temperatures, indicative of that phase 4 and 5 of the MJO. Also talk about the potential with the stratospheric warming, the very brief reversal in the mean zonal winds. Does that have an impact? Does that propagate down through the column and have influence into the month of February? All questions that will only be answered with time. So GFS ensemble, you can see here, upcoming 5 days, we've got that deep negative extending from the subtropical Atlantic all the way up into the Arctic region. Strong positive over southwestern Europe. That is a very mild southwesterly flow overall for the upcoming 5 days. Now, the model is updating, so we can't go beyond day 5 through 9, but this takes us out to the final days of the month between the 26th and 31st of January, and we continue to see the ridge over Europe, trough over Greenland, positive NAO/AO setup here. Looking at the CFSV2, slightly outdated version because it's currently updating, but this is week 1 into week 2. You can see the continuation of that positive NAO/AO, and then as we move towards week 3, which is the 4th through the 11th of February, there is some slight changes taking place as the trough close to the Arctic starts to drop into Scandinavia. That ridge of high pressure over Europe essentially tries to kind of shift more west and northwest over the Atlantic here. The question is going to be, do we see a return to the pattern that was seen back both early December and also mid-January to a colder theme, or are we starting to see a little bit of a shift in the atmosphere and the feedback, the MJO, the El Nino even playing a role, and also the Indian Ocean dipole, and what influence will the stratosphere play down the road? So we're going to watch that, going to continue to see that evolve in the coming days and weeks to come. Finally, let's have a look and see what the warnings are with regards to Storm Jocelyn. So this is straight off the Met Office Twitter page. Amber warning has now been issued. This is going to be in effect between Tuesday 1800, so 6 p.m. tomorrow through 8 a.m. on Wednesday. And you can see that the general focus of strongest winds. Now, we are going to potentially see 60, 70, possibly even slightly higher wind gusts across parts of the high elevations of Wales, the Pennines, for example, northwestern England around the Cumbria area, but also up across the north of the British Isles, where we are going to see the strongest wind gusts in excess of 70, 80 miles per hour, up the western side of Scotland, across the north coast, and then even up across parts of the Aberdeenshire coast. We may see winds in excess of 80 miles per hour, hence the amber warning that is in place from the Met Office here. So we'll watch this space. We'll see what Jocelyn brings in the coming days to come, and we'll report on that when the information comes through. So I hope you can stay safe and warm wherever you are this evening. Windy, wet conditions through the overnight tonight, and then we ramp things back up once again as Storm Jocelyn moves in. Stay tuned to hear on marfloganweather.com and YouTube. And also, I think I'm less than 60 subscribers away from 6,000 subscribers for the channel. So I would greatly appreciate it if you haven't already done so and you love all things weather. Hit that big red button and show your support. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.